G'day! In today's video I'll be reviewing the MSI Sword 15 A11UE. It's got an 11th gen i7 and an RTX 3060. Let's check it out. I've owned the machine now for around about 2 months. It's running an i7 11800H, came with 16 gig of RAM, 500 gig NVMe drive, an 80 watt or 85 watt max 3060, and a 144Hz IPS display. The build quality overall I find to be fairly cheap, with the vast majority of material being used as plastic. It does have plenty of flex, but also the back of it does have a satin finish to it, which is a bit resistant to scratches, but you still may get them like myself. And while we're at it, let's check out the I/O. So we have a headphone jack microphone combo, USB 3.2 Gen 1 Type A and Type C port, HDMI out, and gigabit Ethernet. And going along the back of the machine, we don't have any ports at all. We do have 2 massive air exhaust vents on there that are fairly wide, so I can see the potential for damage to those cooling fins. And going around on the left hand side, we have some more cooling fins, power jack, a USB Type A 3.2 Gen 1, and a USB 2. Which the USB 2 was a quite odd appearance. The keyboard to me was very familiar, as I've owned previous MSI laptops. I did find the keys to be slightly condensed, and also the power button in the top right hand corner, I'd rather a dedicated power button, and the number pad did feel slightly tacked in. The keyboard only lit up in red, with 4 levels of brightness, one also being just off. The keys themselves also do have a red surround to them as well. The trackpad only really used for web browsing. Overall it was perfectly fine and acceptable. It does have a bit of flex when you do press the keys, as you can see. The screen on this model is a 15.6 inch, 144Hz, 1080 resolution IPS level panel. I don't believe the colour accuracy is really there, and I do find the brightness to be fairly adequate even during daytime use. Typically at night time I do turn that brightness down while gaming. G'day, and this is a test of the webcam with the lights on, and another test with the light turned off. As you can see, this is a relatively naturally lit room. Do look fairly fuzzy. I've definitely seen better webcams, but it seems to be perfectly suitable. Looking underneath the machine, we do get this bizarre looking honeycomb kind of effect. As you can see as well, there is these various pointing sharp pointing triangles. Granted, they don't really dig in too much on your leg, but I can definitely see them scratching up various points on tables. Granted, it's mainly due to the overall plastic design that they're like that. Looking through, we can see the various internal components, so there's definitely a lot of air that's going to get drawn in. We do also have, at the very front, 2 downwards facing speakers near the plastic legs. And while we're here, let's crack off the bottom and have a look. So on the inside we can see 2 RAM DIMMs, 2 NVMe slots, and in the bottom left hand side there's also a 2.5 inch drive, which looking on the MSI website doesn't even have that listed. Which is very weird considering they manufactured the device. They should know how many ports are in there. Anyway, let's keep having a look around. We do also see a 52 watt hour battery in there and a very adequate amount of cooling. Granted, this laptop still does get fairly loud while gaming. MSI have looked to have changed over the input jack for the power. On this particular model it is slightly different compared to older MSI models, including last year's. They still have the 90-degree bend on the cable, which on this model the power jack is right next to a hot air vent, which you have to be really conscious of which way you're facing that cable when you plug it in. One of the biggest issues I've had with the MSI Sword 15 has been battery life. No matter what I've done, I've not been able to get a consistent battery life out of this machine. I just do a simple YouTube playback test, hit play on a YouTube video, and either stick it on power saving mode, or I use the inbuilt MSI software to select the correct profile for battery saving. At one point I've had 3 hours of playback time, where typically I've only been getting about 1 hour of battery life out of it, which is extremely disappointing, as I was expecting hopefully anywhere up to about 4 hours. Granted, I'm being a bit blessed by ultralight laptops with low-powered processors, but even still, I find if you're wanting to use this for a school computer, it's probably not going to be the one for you. Now, I've talked about the biggest negative of this machine. I might as well talk about one of the biggest positives of this machine. With the 11800H, 16 gig of RAM, and the RTX 3060, which for me typically run at 80 watts. Granted, the MSI website does mention 85, but I believe that is dynamically boosting. So unless you're underutilizing the CPU, I don't believe it's a figure you're really going to hit. I've tested out plenty of games, which I do have them on the channel, so check them out. But as you can see here, running Battlefield 1, it's mostly lingering just below 80 watts. Typically I'm playing Battlefield 1, Battlefield 5, and Counter-Strike Global Offensive, and all of them run perfectly fine on here. The only game that's really given it any hindrance is Cyberpunk, but that is expected with pretty much any machine. Also, another factor is fan noise, which for me, I usually game with a pair of Sony Bluetooth headphones and using a Bluetooth mouse. So noise I don't really hear, but I do notice it does get a little bit loud with sustained heavy gaming. So during a match of Battlefield, near the end of it when I go to turn it off, I will notice that the fan noise was fairly audible. Granted, I have had no complaints for other people in the room while I'm playing. The biggest curse I find on this machine is just that battery life, where it's not quite enough to be able to get through a full school day or a work day. Typically, it's perfectly fine just to fire up and check a couple of websites and turn it off. But being that it seems like it would struggle to play through a whole movie on Netflix, it makes it very hard to recommend due to that point. So in summary, I find that the MSI Sword 15 is like a slightly better spec'd Acer Nitro 5, as it's got better cooling, but the chassis of it's fairly similar, being all plastic. I do find the I/O to be perfectly manageable. I do find it odd the inclusion of a USB 2 port. But the biggest thing that I find is holding it back is that battery life, the very inconsistent battery life that I've experienced with this, lasting anywhere from 1 to 3 hours, even while doing the same task. So even though it's a great laptop, I find there's really nothing that elevates it higher than its competitors at the similar price or slightly cheaper price point.